to you about the Stout family, Spencer and Shelby County. Before we're finished, you'll know who Penelope is. Elijah, Revolutionary War soldier. The old Van Dyke Mill history I'm going to talk about. Reverend Billy, Dr. Stout, and Elk Creek Seminary. I haven't always been a Stout. Here I am getting married to Charlie Stout back in 1967, and we were able to raise two healthy, happy children here in the middle. And Charlie, we met at the University of Kentucky and dated for 4 years before we married. But then we got to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. Charlie passed away in 2022 at age 78. So we got to live a good long life. The original Stout that came to America came before 1620. Richard Stout was his name. And here he is at the top of the family tree. So you see Richard Stout and his wife Penelope, and then you see David Joseph. So his their great grandson was the first Stout to come to Spencer County. His name was Elijah Sr., and he served in the Revolutionary War. On down you see a Peter David Stout, a Levi, Peter David Stout, who was my father-in-law, and then Charlie. And you see Judy waving at you there on the corner right down there, you see? Oh. So I'm going to tell you about one more thing besides that whole family tree. I'm going to come down and tell you a little bit about where the Schindlers come in, and the Wigginton's, and a little bit about the Rice. Do anybody know about the Rice family? You guys do, of Little Mount. There are lots of Rices, and one of Charlie's relatives was Sarah Bell Rice. Now, Richard is not very famous at the top of the tree, but his wife Penelope is. And whenever you run into another Stout somewhere, they'll say, oh yeah, I trace back to Penelope, because it's online, you know, and everybody goes to look up Stout. There it is, Penelope Stout. Well, Penelope was written up in something called Ripley's Believe It or Not. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Have you been to a museum, maybe at Gatlinburg or Niagara Falls or something? Well, Penelope Van Prinsen, when she was age 18, she came with her husband from Holland. Yeah. And they came to New York, or it was New Amsterdam at that time. When they got there, the Indians killed everybody else, including her husband, injured her badly, partially scalped her, thrust swords or whatever through her, left her for dead. But it is said she hid in a hollow tree for 7 days, where she was rescued by an old compassionate Indian who nursed her back to health. So she survived. So that's part of why the story is so amazing. She wound up marrying Richard Stout up at the top of that family tree, and they raised 10 children, moved to New Jersey, and when she died at 110, she had 502 descendants. So I suppose that's a fun story for Ripley's. Yeah. So on down to that great-grandson of Elijah Richard and Penelope. Elijah Stout was our Revolutionary War soldier that came to Spencer County. He was their great-grandson. Born in New Jersey, married Martha Matthews, and they moved to Culpeper, Virginia. So many people that settled in this area came from Culpeper, Virginia. While he lived there, he served in the Revolutionary War. Sometime before 1798, this big entourage of 25 Stouts came from Virginia. It included 25 Stouts, 2 parents, 8 grown children, 6 spouses, and 9 grandchildren. So I like to think about, what did that look like? What did that entourage look like? This picture shows Conestoga wagons with family inside and a guide out front. See all those other Conestoga wagons just in a promenade, risking their lives. Now they may have come in wagons, or they may have come down down the Ohio on a flatboat. From New Jersey down to Culpeper, Virginia. Then if they went through a Pennsylvania route, they would come down the Ohio River, perhaps to the Kentucky River at Frankfort. Because, and that's what I think they did, because there you see we're coming down the Kentucky River to Woodford County. They were in Woodford County at Forks of Elkhorn Church by 1798. So it was a Baptist church, and they were Baptists. And I put some pictures of some of the churches in the area that they were affiliated with. The question, why did they come to west to Kentucky? Why did any of those folks come west? Well, there are three reasons I listed here. Some war soldiers were given land, and in order to claim that land, they had to settle on it, and raise crops, and build on it. So that's one reason folks came. Secondly, they were seeking opportunities. We had all kinds of resources in Kentucky, fertile land for agriculture. But the third reason, which is what I think the Stouts' reason for coming was, because they were Baptists. And a lot of Baptists came to this area to seek religious freedom. In Virginia, those farmers had to pay taxes to the Anglican Church. And how long had it been since they fought a war to get away from the King's Church? I've also read in Baptist history that they were persecuted in Virginia because they didn't worship the right way, Baptist. So that's really why I think a lot of those folks came. Here's Elk Creek Church, Taylorsville Baptist Church, Plum Creek Church, are three of the Baptist churches that they were affiliated with. By 1800, they came to Buck Creek. So they left Forks of Elkhorn, came down Midland Trail, which goes through Shelbyville, to Buck Creek Baptist Church, which is now Finchville Baptist Church. Then they came to Elk Creek in Rivals area. They came, you see up there on the top of Spencer County, you'll see Elk Creek on the right, Normandy, and Rivals. Do you all say Normandy? The old folks do. Do you still? Mary Ann does.
I have never heard anybody in my family say it another way.
Anything else? Yes. And so, by the way, this is my cousin, Charlie's cousin, Mary Ann Stout, and she's here. I'm so glad she's here. She's a member of our society, doesn't get to come as much as she used to because of her job. Okay, I'm gonna tell you about these three locations up here, and wondering where did they settle. We know they settled in those areas, and on the 1810 census I found, look who I have found on that census, Joseph Stout, Matthias Carlin, Peter Van Dyke, Elijah Stout, and William Stout. So big names that we have all been very familiar with in working with these cemeteries. They all lived right there together. And if I'm not mistaken, the Carlins and the Van Dykes and Stouts all came from Culpeper, Virginia. A lot of intermarriage there too. So here is the lineup of Elijah and Martha's children that came, grown children that came on that expedition to Kentucky. I want to talk about Peter first. Peter Stout, 1773, had two grandsons, and the first one, Charles Levi, is Mary Ann's third great-grandfather. And the second one, Peter David, is Charlie's, my husband's, third great-grandfather. So I want to tell you a little bit about those folks. Here's a map of the northern part of Spencer, and you see in this yellow area over here is Rivals, Kentucky, and that's where the mill is, and that's where Charles Levi settled in that area. You also, I'm not sure you can see a little orange spot that says where Carlin lived. We know all about the Don Carlins. Well, I don't know if you can see, but you see Van Dyke Mill, I hope, the Stout and Rivals who ran the mill, that's Mary Ann's great-grandfather. And so that area, and then I'm gonna go over to the blue area where Peter David was, but before we do that, look at that Stout circle up there with the green around it, because that's where Elijah's monument is gonna go. Oh, this is a little bit better. So you can see Van Dyke Mill, And by the way, this is Brashears Creek. If you're not familiar with Brashears Creek, it's amazing. Comes by Finchville there and on down. I think it's just fantastic. Anyway, in the crook of it here is where the old mill was. I wish I had my pointer, but I don't. Okay, let's see. Okay, Charles Levi, Mary Ann's great-grandfather.
I love that picture.
I found that of him leaning back on the mill. He owned and operated the Van Dyke Mill. In this picture, you can see the wheel in that drawing. 1789 to 1889 it says, but I think Charles Levi bought it in 1880, right around there. The old Van Dyke Mill, up at the top you can see the oil painting that I have that I got from Charlie's parents' house. And it's kind of a romanticized painting, I think, because this is what the mill really looked like. These are photographs. In this top one, the three guys that are sitting out front, if you can barely see them, Charles True Stout, Ellis Stout, and Mr. Charlie, so that's Charles Levi. Ellis was your grandfather, correct?
Yes.
Charles, okay. Then he and his descendants ran the mill. They were the last operating owners of the mill, 1880 and 1959. For those of you who don't know, did I say this? Our logo of our historical society, and we've got it on these note cards, is the mill. So that's why it's of interest so much to us. But I believe that it was one of 55 mills at one time in Spencer County. So, everybody had to grind their flour. And so anyway, interesting info about the mill. It was built by the Van Dykes, 1789. It was a 4-story grist mill, sawmill, and a carding mill. And it housed 4 sets of French stone burrs, or millstones, and they were imported from France. Now think about how did they get here? Okay, according to Mary Frances' book, but I'm going to refer to Mary Frances Brown's History of Spencer County here that Lowry Brown's mama wrote, put together. Fantastic. Anyway, this is straight out of her book. According to the Smithsonian Institute, so you reckon it must be true, these stones were deposited in France some 400 million years ago by a meteorite shower. Now, do you believe that?
Wow.
But they were unsurpassed for hardness, it said, because of that. They traveled through the Cumberland Gap by horse-drawn wagons. Poor horses. They came down Midland Trail, I suppose through Shelbyville, and to the site in Rivals. The mill and the wheel were powered by an undershot wheel under an 11-foot head of water. Mary Ann and I each have one of these flour sacks. Van Dyke Roller Mill, Snowdrift Flour, self-rising, C.L. Stout and Sons in Rivals, Kentucky. I like the directions. Add necessary lard and make soft dough with cold water or sweet milk. Bake in a hot oven, but don't add any baking powder, salt, or soda. Van Dyke Roller Mill, C.L. Stout and Sons proprietors, Spencer's Pride, best patent flour. Give us a call, telephone 26-6.
Oh my goodness.
Route 3, it's still Route 3.
Spencer's Pride, I like that.
So Mary Ann and I had not met, so we got together at the teacup and met, and she knew so much about the mill and loved sharing it, because I'll tell you in a minute why she knew so much. Well, here it says right here. Mary Ann's father had these note cards designed and printed. That Charles Dawson Stout was the one who had those printed. There were a lot of articles about the old mill. This one in the Spencer Magnet says that it was a 4-story log structure. The gentleman pictured here is Mary Ann's grandfather, Charles Dawson Stout. Father. Okay, sorry. Okay, and this is a turbine. Is this what's out in your front yard, the turbine? Okay, and here's part of one of the millstones in this article. This is an article written by Byron Crawford. I love some of the things it says here. It says, it ceased operations about 1946. From 1789 to 1946. Woo. When the mill was torn down, Charles Dawson says, a part of me died. From the time I was 4 years old until I left every waking hour that I could sneak away from home, just across the creek, I spent in that mill. That was heaven to me. When the mill was gone, I couldn't go back out there for 5 years. Stout remembers still his favorite spot in the mill, near the window on the 3rd floor. I could feel the vibrations there of all the gearing and the belting and the line shaft and so forth, and I could look out the window at the sun, or in the late afternoon in the summer at the creek. My family calls that creek Pap's beloved creek. Sometimes he pictures, this is Charles Dawson, pictures the footbridge that, I'll show you a picture of that in a minute, that led across the creek to his house, 1/4 of a mile away, or the path that he followed to his grandfather's house, that would be the mill house, I'll show you, when he was sent to tell his grandmother to set some extra plates for customers waiting for their grain to be ground. Sweet. Here's the footbridge. So the footbridge was connected to 2 sides across Berkshires Creek. And would y'all want to walk across that?
Yes.
Many times.
Have you seen Berkshires Creek when it was? I wouldn't want to walk across it.
Bounced
No.
in the middle of it.
Do any of you remember Ted? Any of you remember Ted Wright? He was a member here. You do, don't you? Ted Wright. He sent me these pictures. I've never met him, but he has since passed away. One of them says 1922. The Van Dyke Mill in 1950 is pictured here in this picture, a little bit decrepit. But I like this picture because you can see, if you look carefully, back here behind it, you can see the mill house with the chimney. See that? It was sold to the Wills brothers in 1960 and torn down that year.
No, it wasn't torn down till 1969.
Say it again.
It wasn't torn down till 1969.
Oh, goodness, wonder where I got that info.
A typo.
Surely not from Mary
9 and
Frances.
0 are right next to each other.
Here's a picture of the mill house, which was the home of Charles Levi, Stout's family, and it was just right next to the mill. It's not there any longer. It's just if you go on Van Dyke Mill Road and go around that curve right by the creek, that's where it was located. Those trees are still there probably. And it had these beautiful old logs that Mary Ann, I think, said it was from a slave cabin maybe, that was either there and then built around. But I was told that when the house was bought by new owners, they tore it down. People wanted to buy the logs, and whoever that was didn't want that to happen, so he bulldozed the whole thing into a big hole. Now, nearby the mill there was a distillery, and it was called Bone Set Distillery. You know what Bone Set is? There's a picture of it. I think we probably see that. It was a wild herb that they brewed with whiskey to make tonic used as medicine for man and animals, because there were no drugstores back then. How did Rivals get its name? Well, Charles Levi was asked to submit 3 names for a new post office. So he submitted Bone Set. The second one was Rivals, and he had.
I got another correction.
Oh, good.
They were all sitting around in the store where the post office was going to be.
Yeah.
And they wrote Van Dyke's Mill in the first line because that's what the area was called.
Makes sense.
And they put Bone Set because that was the old name for it. And then they were studying on what on earth to put on the 3rd line. And I was told this by my grandfather.
Sweet.
Looked around and saw the rival shotgun shells and put that on the last line, and that's the one the post office chose.
So it's Rivals to this day.
Mhm.
Yes, it is. I'm so glad you could add that. Okay, now if you look from Rivals over to the blue, there is Normandy. And let's see if I have another. No, I don't. Okay, this is where Peter David, that would be my husband's great-grandfather, settled. He ran the Stout farm, and until I saw his obituary, I did not know. Oh, here he is, Peter David Stout, 1863, and his wife, Elizabeth Egan. Till I saw his obituary, I didn't know that he was the agent at the Norman Depot for the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. I didn't know that. Died at 52, Elk Creek Baptist Church. All these folks were Elk Creek Baptist Church people. Now, here's a picture on a postcard of the Normandy train station. And I was looking at this today, deciding, I think that train was going north. And that would put in that two-story building now where people live, that we were wondering if that's not where the depot was. But anyway, I think the train is going north.
The house is still standing.
The house is still standing.
They've
But how
added
do
an
you-
addition on the right side.
Which is a
out of the
two-story addition,
Mhm.
right? And this is only one story.
picture. Yep.
Normandy. Charlie's mother Ruth sent us this postcard of the Taylorsville Hotel. She says, this hotel was owned by Charlie's great-great-grandfather, probably some of your ancestors standing on the front of the hotel. I thought you would like to have this picture, R.E.S., Ruth Elizabeth Stout. Do any of y'all know where that hotel was? You do? Get with me
Yes,
later.
it
let me
was
know.
right next to the red scooter,
Oh,
Wasn't
going,
it on Cross Street
going,
toward the
East.
flood wall?
it was across from Bennett's.
Huh.
Mhm.
Okay, good to know. Well, it was back in the family somewhere. Now, here's a picture of Charlie's mom and dad. Peter David, got that Peter name, and Ruth Elizabeth, and they lived up on Town Hill for 60 years. David was a mailman on Route 3 for 30 years or more, and here I put a picture of where he was the moderator of First Baptist Church for 30 years or more. And Ruth was from Nebraska, and the two of them met when Peter David was Pete in the Army Air Force out in Denver, Colorado. And she was a pretty young secretary who went from Nebraska to the big city of Denver and married this good-looking soldier, and they had a little boy, and it was my husband, Charlie. Stout was born in Colorado. When World War II was over, it was time to come back to Elk Creek with that 18-month-old, and they, I'll tell you a little bit more about where they came and what that was like. By the way, they were born in 1918, so they were baby boomers from World War I, and Charlie and I were are baby boomers from World War II, right? When those soldiers come back from war. Now, secretarial skills for Ruth, she sure did use them in Taylorsville. She was the secretary of First Baptist Church for several years. Also, when First Baptist Church celebrated 150 years, she was the editor of this book that I have up here with the history of First Baptist Church. Also, she used her secretarial skills for the Historical Society. She was the first secretary of the Spencer County Historic Society. When I emptied their house, I found a folder of minutes of the Historical Society, and so here's a couple of clippings from there. January the 30th, 1975, at the home of Mrs. Knox Brown. That's Val Cluse. We know Val Cluse. Do y'all know where Val Cluse is on there? Tell you later. It's a 1806 house that we've been to not long ago. But at the home of Miss Knox Brown, they met. They were going to do their articles of incorporation. The next month, February 27th, 1975, they met at Miss J.D. Brown's house. Well, that's Mary Frances. That's Lowry's mama. And look at who the officers were. The first president of this historical society were Mrs. Mary Frances Brown. That's Lowry's mom. Vice President Miss Nellie Wallace Snyder. Anybody know who that was?
Yes.
And the secretary was Mrs. Ruth Stout, my mother-in-law. So she was the first secretary of this group. I see Lucille McLean's name on there. You may know John Carr, Charles Smith. You guys know all these people. Okay, so from Normandy, by the way, I think down from the Normandy post office is the Carlin Cemetery. It says cemetery, and it's on the way to Rivals. So I think that blue mark right there must be the Carlin Cemetery, don't you?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, let's look to the left and talk about Elk Creek for just a minute. Elk Creek is where Ruth and David came back to the house where he was born, the home where he was born, to raise their 18-month-old. You see up to the left, I won't talk about that, but there's an old cemetery. I will show you a picture in that old cemetery at the end. And then down Wilsonville Road, right on Elk Creek Road, turn left on Wilsonville, right there is the house where they were, where they came back to. I'll point out two other things before we move on to that house. Elk Creek Seminary has a blue underline under it. Elk Creek Seminary. You probably haven't heard of that. And then the two green lines say Dr. H.H. Stout. So Dr. H. Harding Stout is buried in Elk Creek Cemetery. He's Elijah's great-grandson, our immigrant, our Revolutionary War soldier. And this beautifully framed in barnwood sail bill, is an interesting story for me. A man who goes to First Baptist Church with me, named James Collings. We've had a lot of Collings people buried over McGee, right? Okay, Blythe, their son, still goes there. But James Collings was an older gentleman who learned how to cane chairs. And that's an old skill that you don't see too much anymore. So I had a chair that needed cane, just repairing. I asked him if he would work on it. He said yes. I took it to his home, and he said, I want to show you something. And he showed me this sale bill that he had on his wall, because this James O. Collings must be maybe a great-grandfather of his. The Collings were right around Normandy area too. But I thought you would enjoy some of the things that it says on here. It's February the 5th, 1892. At 1 o'clock sharp, the following described properties would be sold: 2 good cows in milk, 1 fresh, 2 nice heifers, 1 shorthorn yearling, 2 brood sows, good family horse, farming implements consisting of a wagon, hay, rake, mower, cultivator, plows, and so forth, lots of lumber, household and kitchen furniture. You can tell that H. Harding had to farm instead of just be a doctor all the time. Also, a fine assortment of medicines, surgical instruments, medical books, many of them new, costing $6 to $8 per volume. Terms of the sale: sums under $10 cash, over $10 credit till December the 25th of that year on an approved note, negotiable and payable in the Bank of Taylorsville without interest. 1892. On in the big 1882 atlas, which is where I've gotten all these maps. Everybody familiar with this? The 1882 atlas of Nelson and Spencer counties with all kinds of maps and things. I thought the advertisements on the Elk Creek page were fun. Stout and Fields were proprietors of Van Dyke Mills. On down a little bit, you see Carithers. Carithers and Hall were dealers in all kinds of stock, fat hogs and sheep. Does everybody know where the Carithers? We've already talked about the Carithers Cemetery. S.P. McKinley specialized in trotting stock. Is that horses? Trotting stock. And gold dust stock was a specialty. Don't know what that was. On down, you see Colonel S.R. Norman, which I wonder if Normandy was named for him, that he lived, that was the big house where Lisa Kaler, do you know our CPA, Lisa Kaler, lives in that big Norman house today. Anyway, he was a notary public. Produce taken in exchange for goods. So you could take your vegetables and exchange them for boots. Or chickens, exchange for other things. R.J. Dale, anybody know where Dale Lane was? He was a dealer in mules. R.J. Jewell, cheap for cash, he advertised. And on down to H.H. Stout, physician and surgeon. But there are 2 other physicians and surgeons right above him. I thought that was fun. Now, I told you about Peter, David, and Ruth. Ruth married a Pete in the World War II, and he came home, and he was David. This is a picture of the house that is on, just after you turn off Elk Creek Road, right on Wilsonville Road. Here's the house as it looked back then. The young lady in the holding the dog is Charlie's grandmother, Maggie Bell Schindler Stout. And I don't know who the second girl is. I've tried to figure out. But the lady in the rocking chair is her grandmother, Sarah Bell Rice Schindler. So she's a connection to the Rice family. And then there's Maggie Bell. David Roland Schindler bought that farm right there where Views of Elk Creek is in 1892. When I found this picture up in the knee wall at the Stout's house, it was old and dirty and torn, and no wonder Reese didn't have it on her wall. So I took it to the print refinery. If you have any old photos, the print refinery on Westport Road redoes old photos beautifully. And so they redid it, and it looks gorgeous. Oh, here it is right there. And while we were at it, I had them add the names and the dates because I figured I know what they are and nobody else will. The Schindler Stout House, I decided to name that house. And then I said, let's put Elk Creek on it because if it ever gets on the wall at Cracker Barrel, people will know it's Elk Creek, Kentucky. Okay, so this is where Peter David grew up. The little boy in this picture is Peter David. You think he's about 2 years old? Is he happy? No, what 2-year-old wants to have a hat on and not be able to run and play whenever this is Easter? The lady in the white with the pin is Charlie's grandmother, Maggie Bell, Peter David's mother, and her mother in the middle holding the child is Mariana Wigginton, and then her Wigginton parents on either side, John Wigginton and Maggie Wigginton. This is where Maggie Bell got her Maggie, and then you saw Sarah Bell Rice. That's where she got the Bell, Maggie Bell. Look at Maggie Bell in the white there, and you see the pin she has on? Oh, I inherited that pin.
Oh.
And so here it is. And on the next shot, she's wearing it also. Here she is with my pin. Her husband is Levy Stout, and they called him Levy. Her parents, Mariana and Charlie Schindler. And then the little boy on the right is Peter David. Does he look happy? No. Had to put on a tie and stand still, and I figured those men were pretty hard on little boys, right? And then the cute little boy on the right is Charles Harold Stout, his little brother, who unfortunately died in World War II. His plane was a pilot. His plane crashed in Hawaii. And he is on the wall in our historic, the history room in here, Charles H. Stout. He died in May of 44. And 3 months later, my husband was born. He was the baby. They gave Charlie this same name, Charles Harold Stout. So that's where my Charlie got his name. Here's a picture of Peter David I like because I don't think he's happy again. Knickers, isn't that fun? He had to put on a tie. This is his great-grandfather, John Franklin Wigginton.
Doesn't look too happy either.
Okay, now John Franklin Wigginton was married to Maggie Bellwood Wigginton, and I love this picture of that family. This is up Plum Creek Road, and look at this picture. Can you imagine all that had to happen to get them ready for this? On those clothes, look at the girls had their fans out on their laps. They put the carpet over the stairs in the front and the plant. Anyway, I think that picture is fun. Took a lot of effort to get all that done. This is about 1890. Here's a picture of the house. It's still there. Some people call it the Beard House. So the Beard family lived in it before the Wigintons, I think. And then the second picture of the Wigginton family on Plum Creek Road, about 1902. Okay, this little girl right here is Maggie Bell, Charlie's grandmother. Her mother, Mariana Schindler, and Charlie Schindler. Maggie Bellwood and John Franklin Wigginton. This young man right next to her, to Maggie Bell, is Bellwood Wigginton, who, if you remember, Margaret Wigginton and Maggie Bell were in charge of the children's Sunday school at First Baptist Church for many years, and they lived together. but Bellwood was actually Maggie Bell's uncle, even though they were about the same age. Now, interesting story.
Bellwood is such an amazing thing, because right by the house is a new development.
Trevor Brown.
Yes, and they named it Bellwood, and I just think it's so fitting that Maggie Bellwood lived there, and now the neighborhood's called Bellwood.
So let's just say he
Perfect.
named it, let's just say he named it for that
Perfect.
family.
I love it.
But he didn't. I called him up and said, how come you got that name? My wife, he said, was in the deed room one day and found this name Bellwood in more than one place. And she just liked it.
It's so fitting.
But let me tell you the story about Maggie. Maggie was from Shelby County, and in 1870, at age 15, she came by train to Christiansburg in Shelby County to Elk Creek to go to the Elk Creek Girls Seminary. Here's a census I found. She's living with the teacher. But I also like this blurb about Elk Creek Girls Seminary or Elk Creek Academy. This school is in the midst of a refined, highly moral community, away from the temptations pertaining to towns and cities, and within easy reach of churches of different denominations. It has been in successful operation for several years to prepare males and females for entering college or for practical business. Pupils can enjoy the instruction in all the English branches. What does that mean? I don't know. Latin and Greek, vocal and instrumental music, right there in Elk Creek. The location is second to none in healthfulness. So anyway, there it is. I think I got that picture from Mary Francis's book. Now, just one thing about the Wigginton family here. Down by, our group went to the Little Union Baptist Church, and the Wiggintons are buried right there. But Elijah Wigginton was one of the first permanent settlers in the area. Came back in flatboat down the Ohio, 1806, to Cox's Creek by the Salt River. They discuss here that either he or his daddy was wearing knee breeches and silver shoe buckles, carrying a riding switch and being followed by dogs. He was peremptory and may have been short-tempered. Okay, we're going to go down from Peter now. Let's go to another sibling. His name was Reverend William Stout, and he was an itinerant preacher in this area for years and years. He married a Van Dyke. He married Mary Van Dyke, who was actually the child of his older sister, Anne. Anne married Peter Van Dyke, who's a Revolutionary War soldier that we are discussing these days. And 20 years later, she had a brother. Well, the brother married their child, so he actually married his niece. I'm sure God approved of that, I don't know. Reverend William Stout, 1783, born in Culpeper. He married Mary Van Dyke. He was called to preach. He was at Elk Creek Baptist Church and became interested in being a preacher. And when Plum Creek Baptist Church was formed, they needed a preacher. They asked Elk Creek to send them somebody, and they sent William Stout. He was an itinerant preacher for 50 years or more, preaching at Plum Creek, Elk Creek, Little Mount. He was the first preacher of Taylorsville Baptist Church and preached there for 40 years, I think. One thing a lot of people remembered him for was all the couples that he had married. This is where I found that he had written, these are the couples that he had married in 1822 so far. And at the end it says, I do certify that I have married the above couples in the year 1822. And you'll see some Stouts and some Van Dykes, and so anyway, familiar names. So let's finish up talking about Elijah Stout Sr., the Revolutionary War soldier. He received a pension here in Spencer County, not too much, $79.98, I think, in 1834, and I think he died in 37, so he didn't get a pension for very long. Terry, who's helping us get all these Revolutionary War soldiers a monument from the VA, she had Marianne and myself come here to the library and filled out. Marianne is a direct descendant I'm just an outlaw. But we've applied for one of the wonderful monuments for Elijah Stout. So now the question is, where we're gonna put it? And so we're going to another one of those siblings, Elijah Stout Jr., and we know where he's buried. I found a 1930 census that shows us that Elijah Stout Sr. was living very nearby Elijah Stout Jr. So Elijah Stout Jr., we know where he's buried. In 2018 was our first time finding this, and it is out if you're at the mill and you go on up Bashir's Creek on Haley Road to that where I had that green circle, this is the location. The creek runs behind the cemetery. It used to have 5 above ground crypts and only one of them is still standing, and it could be because of the livestock. You see this young lady right here utilizing that for a neck scratcher, and there were horses in the field. But since then, the owner has realized there shouldn't be livestock in a cemetery field, and so there are no animals there. However, because there are no animals, guess what? Weeds. So here's what it looked like in 2024, 6 years later than that first visit. But Terry, bless her heart, she has helped us clean the stone. Here's Mary Ann and Terry cleaning that stone and helped us organize that. Here, Mary Ann and I, looking at the working family tree that I brought and put up here, trying to figure out who's who and where they fit. And we were honored to have members of the society come and visit one day. The farm manager in the white beard and his grandson had weed eated for us so we could make it through all the weeds. And this is Don Carlin and Terry looking at the cemetery. So that's all I had to say, except for 3 future projects. One is searching near Finchville for Benjamin Stout, a Revolutionary War soldier who was a cousin of that Elijah Stout. The man in the red, here's Mary Ann, by the way, and myself, but the man in the red is Jim Stout, a cousin I have met during this process. The process I'm referring to, actually, is in Shelbyville. One of Elijah Jr.'s children, named Milton, I think I'm right about that, with that relationship, he's buried behind Taco Bell. So if you can picture going across I-64 to Shelbyville, right across I-64 there's a Taco Bell. Beautiful cornfield, 3 trees are still standing, and that's where there are 5 Stout graves. Milton and 4 others. The people who own that property now, by the way, it doesn't look green like that today, the people who own that property are going to build this. And they're already broken ground today. And can you guess what it is? A truck stop. Gosh, we need a truck stop. And this little green arrow right here shows the cemetery. And so this will be right by the gas pumps. But, you know, they when they filled out this and got permission to build this, was in December of 24, it says cemetery to remain. But since then, they have sued the circuit court to move the graves to Grove Hill Cemetery. Well, maybe some people would think that's a good idea, but not Terry and not your cemetery people, because they need to respect the people and respect the graves and the people who are buried there. And by the way, if they're 175 years old, what are you going to dig up? You know, a bucket of dirt and say you moved it. So the family, I wrote an affidavit. Have you written an affidavit?
It was impressive.
To say, no, the family wants them to left there. We don't want them moved. And it was before the judge. We've been there 2 or 3 times. And no word lately. But Jim Stout, Linda Clemens of the cemetery board had this sign made, Stout 2 Cemetery, established in 1849. And so Jim and Terry and Carol, what's Carol's last name?
Grace.
Carol Franks helped us. We cleaned stones right there. Terry helped us, and Terry says to put a fence around it, that's what we say now, and leave it there, so we'll find out. But there's a lot of action going on right there, it's all dirt now, big heavy dirt movers. But the cemetery has, orange plastic around it. Last picture here is the Stout Cemetery on Wilsonville Road by the water tower, not far from Carithers. There's a lot of graves there. It's pretty much a mess, but Terry, can you believe it says there's potential? There's potential. So that's my word about the Stout family. You know about Penelope now, Elijah, the war soldier, Van Dyke Mill history, Reverend Billy, Dr. Stout, and the Elk Creek Seminary.